Hello, my name's Tom Wardle, and I'm a senior Dharma teacher with Empty Moon Zen. And this morning, I'll be speaking about a case from the Gateless Gate, case 28, Deshan, bowls in hand. The case. Deshan one day descended to the dining hall, bowls in hand. Shui Feng asked him, "Where are you going with your bowls in hand, teacher? The bell is not rung and the drum is not sounded." Deshan turned and went back to his room. Shui Feng brought up this matter with Yan To. Yan To said, "Deshan, great as he is, does not yet know the last word." Hearing about this, Deshan sent for Yan To and asked, "Don't you approve of this old monk?" Yan To whispered his meaning. Deshan said nothing further. Next day, when Deshan took the high seat before his assembly, his presentation was very different from usual. Yan To came to the front of the hall, rubbing his hands and laughing loudly, saying, "How delightful! Our old boss has got hold of the last word. From now on, no one under heaven can outdo him." Mumon's comment. As to the last word, neither Yan To nor Deshan has yet dreamed of it. When you examine them closely, you'll find they're like puppets in a booth. The verse. When you realize the first word, you understand the last. The first and the last. As to this, it is not one word. First, a small note on context. Absolutely everything you do in a monastery has some sort of cue. Bells and drums signal each activity. And if there is one thing everybody is absolutely sure about, it would be the meal times. But back to the case. One of the great joys of koan study for me is that it strengthens my relationship to the ancestral teachers. Separated by over a millennium, 6,000 miles, and huge differences in language and culture, it's very easy to feel like the figures in our lineage are far away. But when I study koan, I feel like I encounter them intimately and spend time with them, and they become familiar to me, like old friends or that crazy uncle who's always so much fun at family reunions. This case has 3 wonderful characters, and I'd love to introduce you to each of them. But the focus here is really on the old master, Deshan. This is the very same Deshan of the 30 blows. If you speak, I will give you 30 blows from my stick. If you do not speak, I will give you 30 blows. It's easy and entirely understandable to take this as some crazy, now probably illegal technique used by Zen masters to trap students and push them towards awakening. Maybe. These sorts of explanations about Zen abound, and frankly, I find them unhelpful. Instead, what if you approach Deshan's 30 blows as an expression of the Dharma unto itself? No tricks, no gimmicks, no zany techniques. Just a simple presentation of this life. Deshan was equally well known for his silent responses, and we get a few of those in the present case. He was a contemporary of the great master Joshu of Mu fame, and his awakening story appears in case 28 of the Gateless Gate. Originally, Deshan had been a scholar with particular expertise on the Diamond Sutra. He was actually quite opposed to Zen as a young man, and his awakening occurred after a long evening of sparring with a Zen teacher named Lung Tan. The discussion occurred in Lung Tan's quarters, and I always imagine Deshan ranting on at great length while Lung Tan sits patiently. Eventually, Lung Tan suggests that Deshan retire for the night. Chuckle. Deshan starts to go, but turns back because it's gotten dark outside. Lung Tan offers him a candle, and just as Deshan reaches for it, Lung Tan blows it out. And with that, Deshan had a profound awakening. It's a beautiful story, a powerful story, and it shows that Deshan is much more than what his 30 blows would make him seem. Indeed, his tender heart is central to our case. Just like the rest of life, We all have our favorites in Zen, and I don't mind telling you that Deshan is one of mine. This scene right here makes me weep almost every time I think of it, and Deshan in that moment is a model for my own life. What amazing activity. What an utterly extraordinary response. Much like the 30 blows, a pure expression of the Dharma unto itself. Honestly, when was the last time you corrected someone and they just changed what they were doing without another word? But here we have one of the great ancestors, a man of enormous prestige and authority, taking a bump from some lowly cook without protest. Let's be clear here. If Deshan had persisted, the cooks would have done everything in their power to make a meal happen immediately. Culturally speaking, if the boss says it's time to eat, it's time to eat. The schedule be damned. But not with Deshan. Personally, I would have been racked with embarrassment and self-consciousness after such a faux pas. You ever see what happens if you have a hot, sealed container and spray it with cold water? If not, you can easily find videos on the internet of people doing this to tanker cars on trains. What happens is a rather spectacular and instantaneous implosion. That's how I would feel. And that's frankly how I feel several times a day when I bumble something. And maybe Deshan felt some of that. But if he did, it was no impediment to his skillful action. I think this is a hugely important point. As I've mentioned before, Zen suffers from a severe hyperbole problem. And when we talk about awakening, we tend to do it as if it were a permanent panacea. All of your problems, gone. No more awkward feels to get in the way of you doing what you want. Totally unfettered, you will never feel bad again and will respond perfectly to everything that happens, and all will be well forever. You know, when you actually say it out loud, it sounds a little ridiculous. And more to the point, it's unhelpful. That teacher doesn't have a lot to offer me, because that isn't my experience of this life. I am constantly caught up in emotions I don't want to feel, that don't match the situation or my values, that I'd really rather not deal with at all. And they certainly become a barrier to me doing what I want to do. Sometimes because the emotion is too hot and it has me in its throes. But more often because I now have to attend to that stupid, misplaced feeling instead of the situation at hand. And even if I do get on to taking care of what is actually happening, it's inevitably colored by that cloying little emotion, and nothing ever seems to come out as I intend. Sigh. In this koan, Deshan points us towards a profound way of being with ourselves and the world simultaneously. His action honors both the situation and whatever he was feeling at that moment. But from the outside, it just looks so smooth. I doubt it was quite that smooth on the inside, though. This specific scene is one I think of often because I am not a naturally yielding person. Even as a child, I was famously principled and had no real problem speaking out or talking back if I thought I was in the right. Also, I really hate to make mistakes, and I always worry what sweeping conclusions people will draw about me when I screw something up. Obviously, the situation would be made significantly worse if I didn't try to explain myself and why I did what I did. I mean, people might end up thinking I'm some kind of idiot, or maybe just an asshole. Imagine Deshan descending the stairs with his bowls, confronted by Shui Feng, a ripe moment. These kinds of moments happen regularly in our lives, and through practice, I've developed more awareness of them, and particularly what it feels like when they come up. I find that there's a certain energy, an intensity, and time often seems to slow down just a little. And I found that there's rich opportunity in these moments. As many of you know, I'm about to finish an MBA, and that means I've done a lot of work on teams. which is rich fodder for exactly the kind of experiences we're talking about. Due to the pandemic, my program has been entirely through Zoom, and that's probably added to things a little. But about a month ago, I was working on a presentation with my team that we would have to deliver the next day. Everything was in good shape, but we were over time by a couple minutes, and some things needed to get cut. So that's where we begin. Now, in full disclosure, I had written much of the script for this presentation and felt some attachment to and co-identification with my work. I should also add that by this point, we were about 16 hours in, and I hadn't eaten anything all day. A perfect recipe for conflict. As we thought about what we could cut, I advocated that everyone take their part and trim where they could, shave a little down, and was confident that we could get there over a couple of rounds of editing. However, as I was speaking, one of my colleagues cut in, asserted their disagreement, and strongly called for us to cut a big chunk to make time. She even had a chunk in mind, and it was one of my parts. Needless to say, I was thrilled. I was not thrilled. I was tired, I was frustrated, and I was starting to feel like this would all be a hell of a lot easier if I just did it my damn self. Not an option. I also really liked the part in question and felt it included some critical information that we needed to keep in the presentation for everything to make sense. Yes, there were probably emotional reasons for my feelings, but I'm sure that you all see from a rational point of view, I was right. Right? There was important information in there after all. So obviously, I began to take a valiant stand, advocating heroically for these poor, defenseless little details that needed, I thought, to be in the presentation. Hell, the damn thing wouldn't make sense without them. And that's when I noticed I was having a Deshan moment. Or more accurately, I could have a Deshan moment if I could find it in myself to bow to what was happening, just like he did. And I did, though not at all as seamlessly nor as gracefully as the old master. I have to be honest that even though it was a vividly apparent moment of practice, I didn't entirely let go. To help myself along, I rationalized a little. Yeah, sure, let's cut it, and if it doesn't work, we can just add it right back in. So I agreed, and we cut the section that I thought was so important, and you know what? It worked fine, and our presentation was now right on time. Koan study is often thought of as some kind of riddle game. Your teacher gives you this quixotic puzzle to work out that doesn't make any real rational sense, but will somehow force your mind towards awakening. You concentrate on this during your meditation, and eventually you come up with the answer. Then it's on to the next one. Certainly, you could approach koan like this, but I think you would be missing out on some of the richest possibilities that koan offer us. What if instead of seeing them as riddles, we treated koan as invitations? Invitations to experience reality from a specific perspective. Koan study can only begin in earnest after some initial insight, and the curriculum helps us to refine that insight by inviting us to stand here, in this moment, as this being. What can you see of awakening from here? Now, come over here and tell me what you see. Now, what do you see from underneath that rock over there? As we encounter each story, we find that our usual mental maps of the world don't serve us very well, and we're challenged again and again to broaden our perspective. With any luck, this softens us over time and makes us more flexible. But I want to leave you with a small caution about those mental maps. This is not an exercise in revision. The purpose of our practice, whether with koan or without, is not to correct the mental maps we carry in our heads. And it certainly isn't about being right. But the right map will lead you to treasure, right? Not only do you not need a map to find this particular treasure, You don't actually need to go anywhere at all because it isn't far away to begin with. There's another story about our supporting characters in this koan, Shui Feng and Yan To, that speaks to exactly this point, and I think I'll leave you with that. Shui Feng was famous as a man of effort. Always training hard, he took many years to mature in his practice. And this is in contrast to his Dharma brother, Yan To, the man of talent, who progressed very quickly in his training and was actually younger of the two. The two men were very close friends, and Yan To did what he could to support Shui Feng in his training. One night, when they were traveling together, the two men were caught in a blizzard. Holed up at an inn, Shui Feng spent almost all of his time sitting zazen, while Yan To lolled about lazily and slept. Eventually, between naps, Yan To asked his brother why he was so assiduously uptight. In a scene that brings tears to my eyes, Shui Feng points to his chest and says, "I am not yet peaceful here." Yeah, brother. Wanting to help, Yan To invited Shui Feng to share some of his experiences, much like we do in Deshan. One of the things that Shui Feng said was a little poem he had composed after an experience in meditation. He is the same as me, yet I am not he. A profound point, but not yet ripe. Yan To listened to several of Shui Feng's experiences like that before abruptly cutting in and castigating him. "You fool! Don't you know that what enters through the front gate cannot be the treasure of the house? If you want to propagate the great teaching, it must flow point by point from within your own breast to cover heaven and earth. Only then will it be the action of true wisdom." Shui Feng found this very helpful, and I hope you will too. Thank you.